Hello, my name is Matthew Marquardt and welcome to this Unreal 4 Basics tutorial series. In this particular video I want to talk about the material editor. So we're just going to talk a little bit about it by making a semi-complex force field texture. I'd help you guys kind of understand how it works. Obviously it doesn't cover the full gambit of the material editor, but it should give you a head start in understanding how you can create some complex materials using said editor within the engine. Okay, so I've already brought in a bunch of pictures that I'm using just so you guys have a little bit of a reference of what some of these images are. I have Photoshop here. Here's an image. I just threw it together really fast. This is going to be the force field with the metal around the outside with some red lights and then kind of like a blue tinted force field itself. Under channels, you can see right here I have an alpha. So if I turn the alpha on, basically I'm just hiding, just slightly hiding, right, the edges here. So that this part is semi-transparent. It's not full black, it's a dark gray, but this will be fully opaque, so no transparency on the metal. The other thing that I wanted to point out would be in the other texture, this pan scan lines. Technically, this is kind of a waste of a texture. I was trying to do something, but I guess I'm too lazy to go back and fix it. But anyways, if you go over to channels, you'll see that the alpha is what I'm doing here. Notice how the alpha is just a bunch of lines. Theoretically, if you're going to do something similar to what I'm showing in this demo, just make the diffuse these lines, and instead of using the alpha channel, go ahead and just make the diffuse, like I said, those lines, and just not even make an alpha channel at all, and just make lines like this. So that's really just as a precursor to what my textures are, so you understand what you're about to look at when we get back here into Unreal. So now let's make a force field texture out of this. Actually, if I open up this image here, this was me. I took a screenshot of the texture. You see all these nodes, right? So there's a whole bunch of nodes that lead into your texture. This is, of course, the material editor view, and this is kind of the end result, but you'll see something a little bit different when it's actually in engine as opposed to over here. But let's see this in action. Okay, so this is about what we're going to do. So even though this seems ridiculously complex, in fact, all of this right here, so pretty much everything other than this one node, all of this stuff is just for the emissive. All right, this is just how to make the stuff glow. So you'll see there's a bunch of different things and kind of how to do. So I'm going to refer back to this because sometimes I even forget my own methodology as I'm doing this, as I throw things together. But a lot of it's going to be experimentation. But let's take a look at how that works. So let's minimize the photo here, and we'll go back and actually make it. So here's all the textures I need. Right, I've got my diffuse. I've actually got 3 different emissive textures. And then the pan scan lines, which I was showing you before. So I have a couple of pieces of geometry here just so that we can see through it. So you know, like there's a little half circle down there or whatever. This will be used so that you can see that there's actually clearly a transparency. So we're basically going to create a moving, semi-transparent, glowing texture, right? So I want to show you, and that we can actually control the colors of all in one. So like I said, I want to show you some of the cool things you can do with the Unreal Material Editor. So let's make a material. So we only have textures right here. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do material, right? So we'll choose material, new material. I'll just call it FF for force field, and I'll double click it, and here is your material editor. So this has now gone full screen on me here. But you want to make sure that when you're working your material editor so that you know what's really happening, you want to make sure that your live preview, live nodes, and live update are on. Otherwise, you'll be like, how come something isn't updating and so on? So just turn those on, and it'll actually help you quite a bit. So like I said, make sure all that stuff is on when you're doing it. Now, of course, you can make the window smaller or whatever, but I didn't want to quickly talk about the interface of this. So you can see right here in my notes, you know, you do have what is known as the toolbar, the hotbar on the top, which I just showed you some of the things, or other things like if you want to apply and save it and so on, right? You have your drop down menu that have some menus. This right here is your view, so you can kind of see right now we don't actually have a texture in here, but this is our viewport. We can actually see different perspective views. We can do lit, unlit, wireframe. You know, we can show stats and mobile stats and a background and a grid or any of that stuff if we want, if we have any of that stuff, right? So there is a grid and other things, but you won't see until we start actually updating this. You can also choose the type of geometry that the texture is getting loaded up on. Right, so it could be a square, it could be a cylinder, you know, whatever. So it is kind of hard to see with no texture on it, but believe me, it does exist. We'll start working on that. This is your details section. So the details section down here will give you kind of, you know, any parameters that you're fooling around with over here. You get to see over here. Right now, there's literally only one thing in the scene, and that is the material. So this right here is the material. You see all the different nodes that you can apply it to. You'll actually see some things are grayed out. The ones are grayed out because they're only useful when you're using a certain type of material, which you can change by going to the material domain and you can choose different types of materials. You can also change it by changing things like the blend mode and so on. So a lot of these settings up here under material will actually allow us to use some of these. So if we say I went to blend mode and I did like a translucent texture, which is what we really want for this anyways, I'll click on this, and now all of a sudden you'll notice that opacity is not grayed out anymore, and I can select it. So I actually do need that for the texture I'm about to do. So that's why we set it to translucent over here. Now, of course, the difference between opaque means there's no transparency at all. Masked means it's basically on or off. Like there's no in-betweens. You're either fully, opaque or fully invisible, but translucent is that thing in between where you have things where you can kind of see through them, but they're not completely gone. That's translucent. The engine does have an issue with doing a lot of these, especially translucent over translucent. So be mindful of that when you're doing these. It's better to do masked if you can. Like I said, it's easier on the engine, but we'll do a translucent just so we can see some cool stuff. So like I said, I'll set that up in there and we're good to go. Now you do have down here some stats. I usually don't look at any of that stuff. We have the palette over here, which actually lets you choose different types of nodes, and this is all the nodes you can attach. You notice when I showed that image, I had all these different nodes. There's so many different nodes. I mean, it's insane. I don't even know what like 1/10 of them even do, but you're more than welcome to kind of fool around. I mean, you can even see things like blends, like you'd imagine just like a blend layer within Photoshop or something. These will work and serve just like that. They'll do a darken, a difference, a hard light, and so on. So there's a lot of them in there. We'll talk about only just a tiny minuscule amount of them, but you'll see kind of how you can do that. All right. So that's pretty much all of the UI itself. So a couple of things to note. If it does have a hotkey, you'll see it next to the item in here. So if I hold 1 and I want a constant vector here, if I just hold the number 1 and click on the screen, a constant vector will show up. So these are nodes that if you use quite a bit, they tend to have some hotkeys. So ones that they know you'll use a lot, they have hotkeys for. So just remember that. You push the button first, then you left click. And if it does happen to have one, like a panner, you hit P and you click, and so on. So a lot of the ones I'm actually going to use actually do happen to have some hotkeys. I don't have them all memorized, but we can always just type it in up here, even if we don't memorize the hotkey or whatever. Okay, now basically all you're doing, of course, within a material editor is you're assigning things to the proper node. So if I came in here, and let's just go back to my screen over here, and I want to bring in, say, the diffuse, right? So we'll have it look over here. I want to bring the diffuse. I can drag it in and let go. Okay, so you'll see that that image, this is my diffuse, will now pop up over here inside this window. Okay, and this is known as a texture sample. So this is one of those common nodes that you'll use. If you drag in a texture, the texture will come in as a texture sample. You could just type in texture sample and then come over here and then pick the one. So you can actually click right here and then find whatever texture is already loaded up in your scene here. Okay, so you can do that also. There's multiple ways of assigning a texture, but of course the easiest is just grab the texture itself, drag it into the material editor, and it automatically assigns it as a texture sample. So that's how you apply images. Then you have your output and input nodes. So all these different colors basically mean, in this case, this one is RGB. This one's just your red channel, your green channel, and your blue channel, right? And then this one down here is your alpha channel. So if you happen to have a texture that's taking advantage of the red, green, blue as all being different versions of black and white images, say you have your metallic, your roughness, and your ambient occlusion all on different ones. This is Unreal's notorious for that. That's the great thing about it, is you can break it by channel very easily. So let's just say that was my metallic. I can assign that to metallic. Of course, if I was using a metallic type material, this one is not, but you could do it that way. Green, of course, like I said, could be roughness. I assign it to that, and then the blue one could be like the ambient occlusion, and I assign it down there. So you could do it that way. That way you save on textures, because you're literally just going to have one texture for 3 different things. So it makes sense. But right now I'm just keeping things simple so you guys can understand by just having the images themselves separated, as opposed to putting them in different channels and confusing you about what's happening here. Okay, so anyways, but like I said, you'll put them in there, as I said before. Make sure your nodes are live so you can see what's happening as it's happening, and then when you're all said and done, you hit apply, and then you can save the texture and then shut it off. Okay, so once you shut this off, it still exists. If I shut this off and I ask me, do I want to apply and save the change, I'll just say yes, of course, just to save that one thing. But now if I double click on force field here, it'll come back open, right? It's just black now because I haven't even assigned this. So let's go through that whole process. I'm actually going to expand this out so that we can see this a little bit more clearly. But let's go through that whole process. So first, as I said, this, of course, we want to take your RGB and assign that to base color. You'll see it update over here. Let's even set this to a square so we can see that a little bit better. Right, so I can rotate around it a little bit, and you'll see it's actually a square. And now you can tell it just a hair. It's hard to see, but there is a grid going on in there. All right, and then like I said, there's an opacity to it, so we'll take the opacity here and stick it into opacity, and now you should be able to see through it a little bit better. It's hard to tell in here, but that's what's happening. So I can hit apply, and then what I can do is I can actually move this out of the way, assign this to this plane, and there you go. So now you can quickly see that material which is on the BSP. I can see down underneath, right? So it does have that transparency, and there's like a little bit of like a kind of like a scan line effect, right? So that's kind of how I created it. So you can see that that's like a very subtle thing within the alpha texture, and it kind of has like a bit of a gradient too. So there's a lot of little small nuances in how this texture is, but of course the outside, which is the metal part, that part is full and you can't see through it at all, right? So that's it. That's really simple. Okay, so let's start looking into how we create the rest of the node. So the rest of that giant chain was going into the emissive color, or self-illumination, depending on which engine you're using. Unreal calls it emissive. So let's start from the back and work our way forward. So if I actually take a look at this image real fast, and I'll just talk super fast about what's happening, and then we'll go do it. But right here are my panner nodes basically move something. So I'm moving the UVs of these different little scan lines, and I'm actually using the alpha. So remember when I showed you the texture before, that the alpha channel was the scan lines, right? And we, like I said, it could have done it as diffuse, but we'll just do it this way because, like I said, I'm lazy. So we'll do that, and we'll assign it here to an addition. So it's going to add one set of lines, and then down here I do it again and adds a second set of lines, and actually each panner is going in a different direction. So one is going in a negative value, the other one's going in a positive value, so you see these lines in between moving. All right, so that's what's going on here. Then I take this, which basically alphas out. So I have an emissive thing here where the outside is black. What I'm trying to do is I'm alphaing out, because right now the scan lines go through the whole texture. So if I was to take a look at the texture, you would see the scan lines even moving through the metal part, not just the force field part, but the metal part. So what I want is then to just alpha that out so it only has those. So we're doing a multiply here. So I do a multiply by bringing this one node. I'm sorry, this little thing, when I took the screenshot, I didn't realize this was in the way. But you'll see right here that I'll take the both the RGB of each and assign them to the A and the B channel, so it looks just like this, but over here. And now what it does is it basically masks out the edges, okay? Then what I'm going to do is now I'm going to do an addition. So this is what I want at this point. I want the whole thing to glow. So I don't want just the scan lines to glow, because I can have that and assign that into emissive color. I'll even show you that when we get to that point. So just the scans, and if that's what you want, just the scan lines glowing, go ahead. But I want the other parts to glow too, right? I want the little buttons, or not the buttons, but these little things on the outside, and then of course the entire force field I want to glow a little bit. So that's what's going on here. So we're adding that to the scan lines. The scan lines are going to be brighter, so you can see right here how those are added together. So now we're getting both. Okay, now right here I've actually got a number, and this is just a constant vector, until I multiply. This actually, the reason why this exists is the default emissive is not super bright. This is just the value. If you, the higher this number is, the brighter your emissive color will be. So now we can control how bright our emissive is. We want it stupid bright, you know, we can put in 100 or something crazy, you know, whatever. We want it just barely bright, then we can put in like 1.5 or something like that. So it's kind of up to you, but that's what's going on here. This last node, before it goes to this last add into emissive, is basically choosing the color. So now what I'm doing is I'm blending these two together using a multiply. So I'm taking all of this emissive and then connecting it to a color, and now it gives me that blue tint, right? If I change that color, it'll be any color I want. It can be green, then I'll have a green tint, right? And then this other part that it's adding to, so down here, this is just those lights. So if I can make these lights a different color separately. So right here, you see I have just the lights. I'm blending that. So with this, it's the same nodes as these, right? So I'm telling it, hey, I want it to be 10 brightness. I can make it different so that these little lights over here are not as bright as this, or the other way around, where these are super bright and the force field's not. But that's what's going on here. Then I do a color blend, and then boom, put them both together, set it into emissive, and then bam. So that's the backwards engineering of it. So let's go make that real fast. So once again, I'm going to minimize this, and we're going to bring in our other textures because we're going to need all of them. So we're going to go scan lines, emissive, emissive, emissive. So emissive 2 and 3, and we'll drag them all in. So boom, 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 they should all load up. And now let's kind of separate them out a little bit, so I'll drag them out, and then we'll use them as needed. So the first one I need is the panner. So we're going to grab the panner, which is this one, right? So these, it just looks white, but like I said, it's the lines in the alpha channel that count. So we're going to do a panner. So let me maximize this so we can see all this better. So we're going to do a panner. So right click, and I'm going to type in panner. I believe the hotkey was just P, and I could have clicked that, but you can see right here you can do it the same. Click it, and there's your panner. Same thing, you can come over here and find a panner, drag it in, or just type it in and then find it and drag it in. So we're going to set the panner to come into the UVs, okay? and we'll just have it set like that. And then I just want to double check, so I do an add, so we add the two colors together. So we'll do an add, so I'll come in here and type add, and we'll double click that. So, and then if you want to see the node, you expand. So right here we'll expand the node. Now I can have this go into the A channel, and right now nothing's happening. And actually I did it wrong already. I put the RGB, I want the alpha, so we'll put the alpha into the A channel right there, and you should just see lines, right? If it updates in real time. We have to put a second one in, and I guess we'll see it. So what we'll do here with our section here, we'll copy these two, and I'm going to hit Control W to duplicate. So we'll have both of those again, so we don't have to do it again. Same two things I need. Have this alpha go into B, and now we should see the lines. Good. Okay, so there. Now we see the lines because now it's working, because it's actually adding something together. So now we're seeing the alpha channels just showing up. All right, but we need them to move. So right now they're not moving, and you would see it moving even in the node if it was live. But since it's not connected to the material, you wouldn't see it updating here yet. But let's get these to move. So we go to the panners, and you have the numbers over here. You can do the speed X, speed Y. So you can put them in a couple of different speeds. So you can have it on an angle if you want. But in this case, it is set to the X value. If you do the Y value, it will look like nothing's happening because they're moving up and down. But since they're perfectly vertical lines, you can't tell that they're moving up and down. So right here, I'm going to do a speed of, maybe on this one I'll do 0.5. So you'll see one set of lines moving 0.5, and they're moving this direction. And then we'll have the other lines move. So I'm going to come in here to the second panner, and I'm going to set this one to 2. So these are going really fast the other direction. So now we've created, and actually they're going the same direction, but we want the other direction. So let me hit -2. So we'll go boom, -2, and there you go. So they should be going the opposite direction, but really fast. Okay. Now, if I was to theoretically at this point assign this to the emissive without doing any of the other stuff, like I said, this is why we see. I mean, it might, it looks kind of cool with the scan lines, but see how it's not alphaing out on the edges? That's why we need that alphaed out edge. Okay. So how do we do that? Well, this is where this comes into play. So this texture I have is just the force field section, and then the outside is darkened out. So we're going to alpha that out. So we're going to use a multiply this time. So I'm going to come in and type in multiply, and we're going to use a multiply node. And we're going to add this, right, so to the A, and we're going to add this other one here to the B, and in our multiply node, we should see that now, as you can tell here, on this one, those edges aren't alphaed out, but they are now that we multiply them together. And if I was to say now attach this to emissive, we should see that only the force field now has that. Now, of course, if I hit apply and then go back to the view in the scene, it takes a little second to update. You could do it that way, but as you can see through it, and there's that. Now you can control the speed of the lines. You want the lines going faster, slower, on a diagonal, whatever you want, go ahead. But this is just to kind of show you how you can make, like I said, these interesting textures. So you can leave it at that if you really wanted to. I mean, I guess this sells. But like I said, if you want a little bit more control over it, make it more bright, you want to, like have these things be different colors, then, this is how we have to go through the rest of the process. Okay? So there you go. So we have it up to this point. If you take a look here, so after we get there, now what we have to do, of course, is make the whole thing glow. So including the actual force field itself. So all we're going to do is we're going to copy this in this node. So we're going to have these two. So Alt W. So I'm going to do an addition. So we'll have an addition come into this. I'll take this one. Whoops. Well, I don't want to grab both of them. So we'll grab just this texture sample here, which is duplicate of this one. Assign that to B. And we should see in that live node now that it's also glowing that, including the scan lines. So just the scan lines are glowing. But if we come over here and set this into the end channel, you'll see now the force field and the scan lines are glowing. Okay? But of course, they're only glowing so much. And the default glow is this. And you have no control over the default glow. It just is this. Okay, so you can come in here and let's just say you want to make them brighter. You can still kind of see through it now, but it does look a little bit different, right? But like I said, this is kind of the look I'm going for, but you can go through any look or go to any look you want. But let's maximize this. So if we want to control the brightness, of course, now we're going to do a multiply. So I'll duplicate this so we don't have to keep finding them. We'll have this go into 1, and then we need that constant vector. So actually the hotkey is to hold 1 and click, as I showed before. There's our constant vector, and we will click into B. Okay, and now this will give us a value. At 0, it's going to make it black because there's no value. It's really multiplying by nothing is nothing, and so you literally will see nothing. So we need to actually at least put something in here. If we put 1, that I believe just is kind of like the default, I think, comes in. So if you want it to be more than that, let's just say we'll type in 2 so that it's just even a little bit more brighter and so on. Like you can go crazy and type in 20, and see, you'll see how big of a difference well, actually, yeah, you won't see it update. Hello, silly guy. I should assign it to the emissive color, and now we'll see it actually update. So we'll assign it to emissive. Oh, yeah, there you go. See, now at 20, it's super, super bright. So if we just set it to 2, right, that's just a little bit brighter than it was before, right? And if I hit apply and come over, we should see in the scene now it is even a little bit brighter. Boom. So, and so on. So you can control it. Like I said, you go up to as high as you want. I type in 10. Should see update. Boom. Much brighter. Same thing. Apply. Come in. The problem, though, of course, if you make it too bright, especially when the color is white, it's really hard to see through. So now I'm barely. I know I can see it just a little bit. I don't know if on your screen you can, but it's just a hair of the object coming right around here. You can see the bottom of it, but just so hard to see that way. So be careful, of course. The Emissive will make it so the transparency doesn't even do anything. But now we can actually make it so that we add some color to it. So let's add some color to it. So a color is actually a constant 3 vector because the 3 numbers make the colors with the RGB value. So you can, I have it over here. I can drag it in, or you can, of course, just hold 3 and click, or just type in constant 3 vector. But you can double click in here. Now you can choose a color. So if I wanted to make it a bluish color, we come over here, make sure it's not. This is the color you're using. The default's black. So you see now I've got this blue. I can hit OK here. And what we can do now is do another multiply. So we'll copy another multiply with Alt W, and we'll assign this, we'll assign this color B, and we'll put this into A, and then now we can assign this to the emissive color, and it should give the entire thing a blue tint. There you go. Okay, so now it has a blue tint. So of course it can be any color you want. I mean, if I want to make it red, boom, now it's red. So maybe let's just say we do it red, right? So there you go. If I click on that, now we can control both the brightness and whether it's red or not. And now you can see, actually, once you add a color, even though we didn't change the brightness, it's actually a little easier to see through it, right? But that's really the idea. So the last step I did was so that you can have these things as a separate color, was literally just copy this entire set of nodes here. And actually what it looks like is I did forget. I actually forgot a node. I was wondering why these weren't glowing over here on the side, but it's actually completely irrelevant because what we're going to do is we're actually going to use this one over here instead to do that. So let me actually just completely get rid of this one because I guess technically we don't need that. So what I can do here is I can copy this entire process here, like right here from the add to, well, actually, you know what? Let's go all the way back. I don't know. Let's just copy these right here, this far. Actually, these 4. Sorry, I just keep I'm not even thinking here. All right, so we're going to copy all of this, and I'm just going to hit Alt W. We're going to go change this. Okay, so as far as this goes, and actually I did want to copy this too because we do need to put all of these together, so the color and then what we've come up with over here. But we don't need an addition. On this one, I can just put in this. So we'll have this on A. Okay, so this is now controlling just the brightness. So here's our value. We're controlling just the brightness of these nodes. Okay, and then we want to control the color of those nodes. So another duplicate of a multiply. So we'll have those being as bright as we want, which is a copy of the other one. So the brightness should be with the 10, right? And then we'll take the color and we'll assign that. So now we should make just those things a certain color that we want. And then let's just say, for argument's sake, since we don't want them to be the same color so we can see a difference, let's do a green one. All right, we'll do some Christmas colors here. Boom. And then now what we can do is we can take this node and mix it with this node. So we have to do a last of a multiply. So one more multiply. So click on this, Alt W, and yes, it is getting convoluted. But we come in here, boom, into B, multiply this one. So we multiply the one set of colors with the other set of colors. Assign that to emissive. And now you should see it apparently working not at all. Okay, so let's figure out what we did wrong here. So so I got my last multiply in here with the colors. Let's see what's going on. So we should be multiplying again. Should be getting green. Let me just take out this multiply for a moment. We'll see what's going on. So if I sign this, it should get us just green. So there you go. That's working. So I know that works. So here we are, a little live troubleshooting. Okay, this thing, let's find out what's going on with this. So we'll take this multiply node and I'll stick that onto my emissive. Okay, so that's working right also. So I'm not really sure what's going on. Maybe we need to do an addition and not a multiply. So let's do that instead. So let's go and hit add. And we'll try that instead. So boom, we'll add this to this instead of multiply it. And I think that might be our problem. So just pay attention to your blend. Yeah, this looks there. It's clearly the problem because I can see it working in that. So we'll go over here, emissive color, and ta-da! There you go. So now you can control the brightness independently of these lights and the force field and make them different colors, just changing the nodes here. So if I go back in here, there is our Christmas force field. Awesome. Jingle bells all the way. All right. So there you go. So that should be a quick I guess it wasn't too quick, but that should be a good understanding, right, for you guys about how the process works, right? And we can come in here and clean it up and make it look a bit nicer, like grab all these nodes and move them out. And, I mean, it's up to you how you want to do that. But we can grab all the nodes by holding control, move them around, do whatever you need to do. But there you go. So that's the process of how you go about it. So hopefully this video, like I said, helped you guys understand a little bit more about the material editor. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.